Hey everyone, Jonathan Alfonso. Thanks for clicking on our YouTube channel. Today's video, I want to go over asking prices. One thing that's going on right now is, the asking prices that people are listing their properties for in the market, especially in Miami, Florida. People are telling me, hey, what's going on? I'm offering them asking price and what's going on. So I want to get into that, right? What's going on with the asking prices? How do you approach it? What's causing these asking prices to go through the roof? And then most importantly, stay tuned to the end because I'm going to tell you how am I approaching, sellers when I'm representing the buyer and what we're doing to get in there. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. For those of you that's the first time here, I'm Jonathan Alfonso. I try to be your resource for all things real estate related. I provide these videos to try to help you, understand how to navigate the market. So if you guys could just do me a favor and click the like button below, give us a subscribe. It really helps us with the YouTube algorithm and, getting more people, to come watch us, interact with us and, listen to what we have to say and engage in conversation, which just further feeds the ecosystem. So asking prices, right? What's going on? So first things that we have to understand is, and it depends because I know those of you out there, I don't know how into the market you've been. Obviously, I spend every day in the real estate market. And one thing that's happening is people are coming to me and they're just saying like, Jonathan, I just don't understand. This property was listed. The seller had it listed at $500,000. We gave him an offer at full ask for $500,000 and we didn't even hear back from the listing agent. What gives? Well, first and foremost, we have to understand right now there's an inventory crisis and there's just quite simply put, there's more buyers than sellers, right? And so you have to understand that when you're out there, listing agents, they're just getting bombarded with requests to show the property, people calling them, trying to understand what's going on, people, begging to be accepted as the offer from the get-go, people, trying to get into the seller's ear. So there's just a lot of noise going on. And that's just leading to, what's happening in the market, which is you have to be very strategic with how you approach a situation. So let's take a step back. So there's more buyers than sellers, right? So what's happening? Prices are going up, quicker than they were 18 months ago. That's for sure. And what that's leading to is, we're seeing a new demographic of sellers coming into the market. And this is what I try to explain to people is right now I see two types of sellers coming into the market. So we have those sellers that have no urgency to sell and we have sellers that have the urgency to sell, right? And so, for example, those that have no urgency to sell are people that are relocating elsewhere and, they're relocating, they have no set timetable, but they know they're going to leave. But I am seeing that those people are having more success because maybe they're going to a less competitive market and so they can sell with calm in Miami, Florida, and then, calmly go look wherever they're looking and they're not going to have a difficult time. Or I'm seeing a lot more sellers that are a trust. There maybe it's a probate, maybe it's a second home, an investment property that an investor's been thinking for a while. Well, you know what? Maybe now is the right time to cash out, right? So you have that group of sellers. Then the other group of sellers that you have is those that have the urgency to sell, right? So, we can group in there the person that is selling their home to go buy another home, right? Or there's the person that has the deadline of some sort for some sort of financial obligation. So maybe they have some needs they need met, as far as like maybe there's a creditor they need to pay off, or maybe they're just, they know they're on a ticking time bomb as far as how long they can stay on the home and they're figuring let's cash out now and go leave. So they've kind of given themselves a deadline in that sense of, we need to get out of this house. Now, it's very important because when you're out there and you look at a property, your listing of what you see. So when you go out there, whether you're looking on Zillow, the MLS your realtor gave you, you're not able to see like, hey, guess what? Seller is getting divorced. They signed the marital settlement agreement and you know what? They want out of the house. It's very difficult to see because all you see is beautiful pictures most of the time and an asking price. So why is it so important to determine the motivation of this seller, right? Well, you need to determine the motivation of the seller because right now the market is in an upswing, all right? So because the market is in an upswing, you have your typical types of buyers, right? Urgency, no urgency. But now you have a lot of people that are just coming into the market where, I like to call these the testing the market types, right? Because there's no real urgency other than they just decided, you know what, let's test the market, right? Who are these test the market people, right? One thing that I'm seeing a lot more of is realtors. Realtors themselves are looking at their house and saying, well, wait a second, my neighbor sold for, X amount, so whatever, let's say it sold for 800,000 and it's like, oh, well, I have a beautiful kitchen. So they're like, I'm going to list my house for 925, and they have no barrier to entry because they know how to get photographs quickly. They know how to do the marketing. So boom, they put their property on the market and they have no real plan for where they're going. The next step is, it doesn't just have to be a realtor. It could just be an actual seller. And they're like, I'm going to list my property with a realtor at an astronomical amount. Same thing. They also have not thought through their next step. In other words, they're saying, oh, I'm going to list it at this astronomical amount, but they haven't gone forward and thought to themselves, where am I going? Where am I headed? Where am I going to live? And then once they start to see all the action they get on their home, all the activity, now they finally go out and start to look for a home, and they realize, oh my God, I can't just turn around and go buy a house tomorrow. What am I going to do? They decide not to sign the offers on the table. And that creates an issue. The third issue that you see is you get what I need to come up with a term for, to be very honest, which is, the sellers that I'm hearing them say, well, they're on the market, their house is extremely overpriced, even considering that buyers are paying a premium, but the seller is taking the position of, well, you know what? I may be overpriced, but the market is going up and it'll catch up to me, which then leads to another issue, which is, well, what is that when that same seller finally decides what they're going to do and decides to make a move, they decide, well, you know what? let's say they had it listed at 800,000 and it was extremely overpriced. That same seller is now also, 6 months later saying, well, now I want 925, making that number just as ridiculous as 800 may have been a year ago. So, you need to, the reason I bring this up is I think a lot of people think, well, somebody's putting their house on the market, like they want to sell. You have to realize there's a lot of these testers out there that are just testing the waters to see what happens, and they have no idea what's going on. So keep that in mind when you see the asking price. The reason I think it's so important to label sellers, and the reason I spend a lot of time kind of dissecting that when somebody gives me an offer and we're going through the motions and I'm trying to do it and I'm trying to help them get their offer accepted, is because you have to understand right now, that's one big phase of it. And now you're looking at the price, right? And you're trying to determine, is this price is correct? Because here's the important thing. I think whereas 2 years ago, where the market was, more or less stable, depending upon where you were at, you weren't seeing too much craziness as far as, you were seeing like a 10%, increase in prices or like a 10% decline. It was just, kind of your stable market. When you saw a property listed, the asking price, except for, if it was, an absolute gem and underpriced, for the most part, the asking price was kind of your suggested retail price. And if you offered that to the seller, chances are your offer was going to get accepted. In today's market, when I'm, making this video today, March of 2021, asking prices to me, they're like, a suggestion, like, hey, by the way, we're asking 900, but, if you want it, you're going to have to give me, basically 900 plus, your car, and, I like your watch, and hey, who knows, maybe they'll take your significant other, the way the sellers are acting. But I mean, listen, obviously I'm joking. The point of what I'm saying is the 900K, you have to look at the variables. So, what's important when you look at the asking price of a property, determine a couple of things, right? Look at the days on market. How long has that property actually been on the market? Because if they just put it on the market, good luck trying to bring that seller down in price, right? And listen, part of the reason I'm making this video is a lot of people look at the price of the property and they're like, Jonathan, it's listed for 900, but I'm not willing to pay more than 825. And then my response is like, well, it just got listed yesterday. So, I mean, you're going to show up now and tell them, hey, by the way, your property is poorly marketed. You have the wrong pricing. Like, you want to be that guy? Nobody wants to be that guy. You know why? Because that guy most of the time gets ignored and written off by the listing agent and the seller. So pay attention to the asking price. Look at how long has the property been on the market, right? If the property just hit the market and you're looking at the asking price, go out there and check out the property, right? Like, be one of the first ones to see it. Look at the activity. Like, if you see 45, 50 people at the property, pay attention to that, because if there's 45, 50 people looking at that property, which you think has an incredibly high asking price, I agree. A lot of those people looking at it probably have no other properties to look at, and they're checking this property out. But that seller is going to feel in a good position of, I have 50 people to choose from, and I can probably squeeze one of them to give me my asking price, notwithstanding the fact that you may think that the property is overpriced, right? And then here's my next tip. Look at the asking price. See how long ago it came on the market. Then the next thing is look at the comparables. Look where they are more or less, you know, and you're going to need a real estate professional to help you with this. Or if you're very good at like pulling comparable sales, go out there and look at, you know, the 3 properties that are closest in price, you know, closest in, you know, overall specifications to the home you're looking at, and see where it's at. Because, for example, if a property is listed for $900,000 and the comparables are around $850, $875, you know, hey, listen, the seller, the market's trending upwards. You know, I think most sellers right now are in a position where they can say, well, the comparables are here. We can go a little bit above that because there's just so much demand. So you kind of want to gauge, like, listen, every seller is trying to figure out how do we get the top, right? And yet every good realtor also knows that, listen, if the comps are, let's say at 800, all right, if you can list it at like 810, 815, 820, you're within the range that, listen, if the comps are right there, or even if you list it right at 800, you're going to create a bidding war, which is going to get as many buyers as possible looking at it. And then that increases your probability that you end up, you know, at 850, 860, 875, and you end up, you know, 75K over appraisal, as opposed to pricing the property so high that so many people get turned off that you don't create that bidding war. So it's kind of like there's that sweet spot that everybody's looking for. So now that you have the idea, right, and you understand, listen, the asking price is a suggestion. They're probably looking somewhere within that range, obviously on the higher end if it's the seller. What you really want to do is you want to get to the property and you want to gather more information, right? So, you know, if the property just hit the market, right, that's fine. Listen, if the property just hit the market, and let's say it hit the market at $900,000, and you're looking at that property and you're thinking it's overpriced, there's no point on you going on day one and going to that property and telling the listing agent, hey, here's an offer for 800, like, you let me know if you want to talk. Because the reality is they probably received like 20 offers, and I would venture to say, you know, the chances that you at $100,000 under asking are in first place is just going to kind of lead to you getting pushed out of contention. I think it's probably a better strategy for you. Wait a week or two, see if the property is still on the market. All right. And then if it's still on the market, approach the seller and then approach the listing agent, be like, hey, you know, why hasn't the property sold? Especially if it's a property that had a bunch of people at the showings. You can kind of start to gauge from there and do that. So when you go to these properties, right, you want to start asking questions. All right. You want to ask these questions because it'll help you determine whether the asking price is a suggestion, if it's the number the seller will take, your probability of getting the deal done, right? You know, questions I think you should be asking is, where's the seller headed, right? So you want to ask the listing agent, because if you hear things like, well, the seller's going to wait until they get an offer to decide, you know, where they're going to go, that's a big red flag to me, because that to me sounds like, well, there's no deal here. They're waiting to see where they're going to end up, and then they're going to figure it out. So that becomes an issue. You know, follow-up question, does the seller have an ideal timeline in mind? In other words, what is the seller's ideal situation? There's a contract we were working on earlier today, right? We were told that the seller's actually going to be relocating. They already have a property in mind. They want to get the contract executed. So I told my buyer, hey, you know what? Why don't you offer them a quick close and tell them, listen, you're going to have the money in hand in 10 days and you can go buy your new house. All right. So, you know, find out what that ideal timeline, because when we offered that to the listing agent, they said, well, that's going to be very attractive to my client, because you've now crept to the top of, you know, the 40 people talking to the listing agent. All right. The obvious next question I like to ask, do you have any offers? All right. What offers do you have in hand? And usually I like asking this one because listing agents love to brag about how much activity they're getting on the home. I have 42 offers and they're over asking, whatever. And listen, where 18 months ago, you probably would have been like, you're probably, you know, bluffing me. You know, nowadays it's very hard not to believe that they have it. But in that conversation where they are, exercising this bravado and telling you about how great they are at finding buyers in a market where buyers can be found anywhere, you can kind of get little nuggets of information to be like, okay, well, maybe that's what's going on, or that's the range I need to be in order to get my offer accepted. Another one of my favorite questions to ask them is, does the seller have a deadline to make a decision, right? A deadline by the seller to make a decision on the offer, especially if it's at the get-go, to me is usually a sign of a seller that has a game plan, knows what they want to do, knows what they want to execute, and shows that they're serious about doing it. But it also means we need to be very aggressive on our offer, because if, let's say, they came on the market on Thursday and they're making a decision the following Tuesday, you have no time for lollygagging, right? You really need to put like a very good foot forward in order to get on that seller's radar, because it looks like Tuesday morning they're making a decision. I like that. What I don't like to hear is the seller's going to wait and see what happens, because when I hear that, what I'm starting to hear is, well, seller has an astronomical expectations of what they're going to get. So they're not just thinking list price. They're not thinking, oh, if I get 900, they're like, well, if somebody gives me 975, then I'll sign on the dotted line. And to me, that is worrisome, because that means now you're are you going to make an offer in that sweet spot of like, okay, they were listed at 900. We would have been okay with, paying 920, 930, maybe 940. But if the seller's now off into la la land, then, what are we really doing here? Does this have any possibility of working out? And the next question obviously is, ask whatever questions you think are, depending upon how the conversation is going, to get more of an understanding of what's going on here. What's the history of this property? If you've seen all my other videos, I always like to find out the narrative, right? How did we get here today? Why is the seller selling this property? Like, what's going on here? What's special to them? What can you do? Because in conclusion, right, I know what you're thinking. Wow, Jonathan, you just made a whole video on asking prices and you basically told me they're meaningless, and sellers are just throwing a number out there, and then you got to go above that, and, comparables don't mean anything, and, what it appraises for is irrelevant, and get into this bidding war. Listen, I know that's how it comes across, but here's ultimately my strategy and why I try to ascertain as much information about the seller, understand what their motivations are and where they're getting. Because my goal is to structure an offer on behalf of my client that puts me in the top 3. Nowadays, I'm not trying to win, because if I'm representing my buyer, I see no sense in telling my buyers, hey, listen, you want to get this property, it's listed at 900, offer her $1,050,000. Like, you're going to win. Like, that just makes absolutely no sense, right? We have to stay within reason. So where I differentiate my clients, and which is where we're having success, is, we're offering quicker closings, right? We have the law firm, we have the ability to get commitments and lien searches back quick and rush. So we're finding out before we even think we're going under contract, we're trying to ascertain as much possible as to, like, let's do whatever cursory searches we can do and find out what's going on there, right? The financing, how can we get most of the financing in order? How ahead can we have that process? Do we have the ability to get someone else to maybe record a mortgage and purchase a property cash, and then maybe the buyers can refinance? We're getting very creative, but we're trying to figure out what is going to be attractive to the seller, right? What are they going to want? And then structure the offer so at least you're in the top 3, because when we're on the seller side, when we're getting offers, I'm reviewing the offers and I'm going through all of them, and I'm saying, all right, let's get 3. All right, and then let's negotiate with these 3. Because if I know I'm in the running, then I can start to differentiate myself from the other ones. And then once I'm there, if I know what my competition is, I know I can get closer to that point where if we're making an offer, we're now the top 3, the listing agent's going to come back and say, listen, we were listed at 900. You came in at 920. You offered us a quicker closing or whatnot, but we had, because typically at that point, they're always willing to say, well, we have an offer at 940. And then we're able to say, yeah, but you know what? They're closing in 40 days. We're closing in 20. A lot can happen in 40 days. You're in and out with us. Let me go back to our buyer. Okay, listen, we'll give you 925. And then maybe we can get it done, and whatever it takes, but do that back and forth. Because remember, nowadays, it's all about getting that information, looking at that asking price and figuring out, how do I get myself to the finish line? In conclusion, don't be discouraged by the asking prices that you're seeing. Remember, go out there, do your research, hire a professional to help you understand it, and be creative. Remember, nowadays, I think that while this market is very challenging, I'm very much enjoying it because it's allowing me to flex, kind of that lawyer. I'm able to bring the lawyer, the broker, everything that I have, bring it all together and, put together creative offers that help the sellers resolve their issues while getting buyers into the properties that they want. If you have any questions, if you want to chat, feel free to send us a comment down below, send us a message through any one of our social media platforms, or reach out to me by email, jalfonso@titleanswers.com, and I look forward to seeing you guys on my next video.